Hello, NAAIA community. Get ready to relive insightful discussions, gain fresh perspectives, and be inspired by the wealth of knowledge our community has to offer. Let's dive into another episode.
Good afternoon, everyone here tuning in to this very important claims clinic, first one of the year. Thank you for being here. This claims clinic is we're going to discuss things that are paramount in everyone's mind right now. Adjusting to economic pressure. And we're talking the word of the year in 2025 so far, tariffs. And we're talking about inflation and how these things are going to affect insurance and specifically insurance claims. We have a all-star panel here that's going to be talking on this topic. Hi to everyone joining in. Appreciate it. Feel free to list where you're calling, where you're checking in from. To get this kicked off, I'm going to introduce the moderator, Tredessa Travers, MBA, CPCU, AIC, Claims Resolution Manager at Gallagher Bassett. She is going to be leading the show here today, and she is the one that is going to be moderating this panel. And to everyone checking in, sit back, listen up, and let's learn. Over to you, Tredessa.
All right. Can everyone hear me? Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today. My name is Tredessa Travers, and I am moderating today's claims clinic with our amazing panelists to talk about the challenges that we're facing today due to rising inflation and trade policies and the effects that it has on property and casualty claims. Again, we have three amazing panelists that I will have to introduce themselves. I will start with Armando Andrade. Can you please introduce yourself this afternoon?
Hello, everyone. First, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be a part of this panel and part of this discussion. My name is Armando again. I am the Executive Vice President for the Best Claim Solutions and Head of Claims. Previous to that, I spent 17 years of my career. The first 17 years of my career was State Farm Insurance. Here at the Best, we have a national footprint for IA services such as independent adjusting, and we also have TPA services as well. So, my combined experiences really make it important that I have, an understanding of what's going on in the economy and how it impacts our customers, right? The customers for all the clients that we work with. So excited to be here again and look forward to talking with you all.
Thank you, Armando. And next we have Michelle Raue. If you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me as well. I am currently the Executive Vice President, Chief Claim Officer for Preferred Mutual. We are a regional carrier that writes property and casualty in the Northeast. I've been in insurance and mostly claims for about 35 years. I hate to admit that. Been through several mid-size to large carriers, took a little stint at Lyft, the rideshare company, but yeah, claims is my life.
Yes, I know the feeling. Mine too. And then last but not please, Calvin Newman, if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Tredessa, and thanks everybody for being on here. My name is Calvin Newman. I'm the owner and founder of MoCat. We are a 13-day all-inclusive hands-on property adjuster training facility. Super excited to be here. Looking forward to the discussion. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, so I will actually just delve right on into some panel questions that we have. So we'll start with, all over the news, we've been seeing all, the news footage about the tariffs and the passing of, the recent tariffs and how it's impacted costs associated, with a lot of different, things that we're buying today. I guess I'll start with Calvin. Can you tell us how those recent tariffs can affect property claims, or if it has?
Yeah, thanks. And from our perspective on a trainer's side, maybe it's a little bit different point of view for someone who trains and mentors the product in property claims, which I consider the product being the adjuster. When anytime there's a disaster, the adjuster is the first person that the insured comes into contact with. And so one of the biggest impacts that we have seen here as of late is actually on the hiring authority side, where a lot of the hiring authorities nowadays are really, we're starting to notice really dialing into the more professional adjuster, the more well-rounded adjuster. And economically, I guess it sort of makes sense. When we've all heard the saying, do more with less. Well, I think what we're seeing is that the hiring authorities, and Armando, we were sort of talking about this the other day, the hiring authorities, be it IA firms or even the carriers themselves, are looking for a more well-rounded adjuster that they can essentially do more with less. I like to call it doing more with more, because now you have the professional adjuster that's coming in and handling these claims. But that's one of the biggest things from my perspective, and as a trainer and mentor in the industry, that's one of the biggest impacts that we've seen as of late.
And I'll move to Armando. Same question. How have you seen, or what do you anticipate as far as the tariffs and how they impact claims?
Yeah, I think from my lens, the most important thing is recognizing how things can change so quickly, right? The volatility for the customer, right? So customer communication is critical, right? We have to be able to predict and almost forecast when we're interacting with the customers and letting them know that, what I tell you today could likely change tomorrow, right? Literally, things are changing that quickly, and that, it's that volatile. So I think for me, some of the coaching that I'm giving to my teams, as well as, and that's being passed down to the adjusters that we work with, is recognizing that the customer is going to have a lot more questions. They're going to have concerns about material cost, labor cost. They're gonna want to know, how am I going to be impacted, right? How is this going to impact me as a consumer if a product that I purchased a month ago was $100 and now it's $250? How is my insurance going to compensate for that, right? So it's really just more or less about the communication piece, and being very transparent.
Thank you, Armando. And Michelle, if you can add to that.
Yeah, I'll take it up and bring you a 30,000-foot view as we look at it from the carrier standpoint. First off, right now, the uncertainty level is so high. I mean, we all have no idea what's going to happen. And from a property standpoint, most of our materials that are imported come from Canada. And so we're looking at aluminum, wood, metal products that are going to increase in costs should we not reach agreements on these tariffs. not only the cost, but the slowdown in receiving them. And the estimation is that this could cost as much to, as 3 to 5 points on the combined ratio, which is a very significant impact. And we just came out of COVID, where this was a similar situation, different reason, and we have already, adjusted rates and brought costs up for the consumer. And the market was just starting to, we've been in a really long, hard market, and you're starting to see a little bit of softening, and then boom, this hits again. And so, customers aren't going to have much patience with increased premiums again. And I think, the states are going to step in with regulations and be really questioning more rate increases, but it's not something, we can control as an industry, and the costs are what they are. We have to account for them. So it's going to entail a better job at education than we have ever been able to do, to say, these are the reasons your costs are going up. And from a property standpoint, when it was COVID, the values of homes were going up. And so it was a little more palatable to people, because if you were increasing their ITVs, they were okay with that, because, hey, my house is worth more than it was. Well, that's not happening with this increase. And so it's just a cost point, and it's going to come in rates. And so it's going to be a little less palatable to our policyholders when and if these rates have to flow through to them. It's kind of, we're piling it on already a bad time.
Okay, thank you. And kind of to piggyback off of that, do you all know, is there any guidance being given regarding like setting reserves due to fluctuating prices? I guess we'll start, with you, Michelle, since you just finished, and then we'll go to Calvin.
Yeah, and I think that this is like where carriers are going to have to make decisions based on uncertainties, right? And so right now, we haven't seen the price increases, but we know they may be coming. So what do you do with those reserves? And I have read a lot about, I think that a lot of carriers are accounting for it in their IBNR reserves instead of their case reserves right now, so that they can have a buffer for it should it hit. But again, it's a place where we don't really know where to put it yet. It's a weird time in the insurance world.
Yeah, good point. Calvin, what, I guess, how do you think, or has there been any guidance, I guess, in your line of work, or in your, I guess, I was going to say office, but you know what I mean, regarding reserves and fluctuating prices and anticipating that?
I like the word anticipation. And again, from an education standpoint, for adjusters, being flexible, but also being that professional adjuster that is well-rounded and educated. For example, Michelle mentioned, or sorry, Tredessa, you mentioned the reserves. Just this past week, just a few days ago, I was on the phone with someone that I mentor, and they were mentioning the reserves. They were working for a smaller company, and they were required to set the reserves. And this is I don't want to say it's a brand new adjuster, maybe 2 or 3 years into the game. And they mentioned, Calvin, I've never had to set reserves before. I don't understand what that is. And so when we when we think about the impacts that are, excuse me, happening with the carriers, that's going to affect the skill level and the knowledge set that the individual adjuster has. We start asking for ITVs or insure to value, the whole concept there. That's going to be a much larger requirement for the professional adjuster to understand things on a much larger level than maybe in the past couple of years that we've had to do. And so, and no specific guidance really, but the impacts that we are seeing is that, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but as the adjuster boots on the ground, you've got to be ready and be prepared to take on maybe not a much larger role, but a more detailed role than times of the most recent past, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And Armando, I know you had mentioned earlier about kind of making the customer aware that, you know, things are going to go up. But can you chime in as far as reserves and fluctuating prices? What, I guess, how are, you know, where you are y'all preparing for that?
So piggybacking right off of what Calvin just said, you know, it's really almost retraining our adjusters, right? Retraining our adjusters to think more like financial stewards than just an estimator, right? It's really focusing on to the point that Calvin made, where you have adjusters who in some cases may not have even ever touched the reserves or had to really understand, conceptualize what the value of the reserves. You know, the other piece is, you know, from a management oversight perspective, you know, making sure that we're using our real-time data to adjust those reserves, right? So we're seeing more frequent reserve reviews, making sure that everything is aligning with the cost volatility.
Okay, good point. Thank you. So my next question is about something that we all are familiar with in handling property claims. So supply chain issues. So actually, I'll start with you, Armando, since you're fresh on the screen. I guess, how do you handle supply chain issues, or has there been an impact regarding repair timelines? Tell us about that.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, we work with managed repair companies as well. So we're seeing, you know, where the benefit of working with a management repair is the turnaround time, right? How quickly the one touch with the customer can impact the life cycle of the claim. So we're seeing those things impacted directly with the claim taking a little bit longer, right? And we're not seeing a huge spike in it just yet, because I think we're very much in the front of this. I think we use the word economic catastrophe, right? That put potential economic catastrophe. So we're not seeing a lot of those things happen yet, but there are still some incremental delays that we're seeing, right? So making sure that, I think you're seeing it more so on the personal goods, personal property, right? Like I'll give you an example. We had a claim very recently where a customer had a camera that they purchased. The cost of this camera was, I think, $300, if you will. Um, the cost, because of the tariffs increasing to 145% on goods coming from companies in China, that same camera was now $625. Well, not only had it doubled in price, it also was now on back order, because these US companies are not having these products on in stock, because they can't get it from the company. So you can order it, but it's a pre-order, if you will, that's going to now delay and take however long. So those are the things we're seeing mainly right now with the delay. It's not necessarily on the material cost to build a home. It's really more so on their property costs, their personal property.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point too. Michelle, same question. I guess, what have you seen as far as supply chain issues and repair, you know, timelines? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think Armando's right. As far as the parts to, you know, we're talking about property, but to rebuild a house or to put somebody's car back on the road, we're not seeing that yet. I mean, there was a 90-day pause on the tariffs, and most of the property rebuild parts come from Canada, which was in that 90-day hold. And then most of our auto parts come from Mexico, which is a strange thing, but so they got a reprieve a little bit. But he's right. The contents claims that lots of those things come from China are where you're seeing some of the instances. But again, that's, that's a cost increase, but it's not so much as a, you're not trying to rebuild your house or those kind of things. They can get replacements that happened here. They just cost a little more. So we're not at the point where, you're running into ALA challenges of people living in or running out of their additional living expenses and that, which we did see during COVID because lumber wasn't available and you couldn't rebuild your house and caused lots of problems. But hopefully this doesn't proliferate and we end up not going that route, but we've seen it. And I guess we've had some practice with how to deal with it from the COVID standpoint.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I guess the key word for this is just, as Calvin said, anticipation and uncertainty. Because we're not sure, how far this will go. But Calvin, same question for you as far as supply chain issues, repair timelines.
Yeah. So I saw something really, really interesting the other day with a claim in particular, and it was actually my father who was working this claim, and he called for some guidance. I don't know if anybody's ever given guidance to your dad, but that was really cool. But this happened not once but twice, and it was two different style situations. So we obviously, those that don't know, we live in Missouri, and South Missouri has been hammered already pretty hard this year, early wind and hail season for us. And in one particular claim that my father went out to work, was an elderly lady. Her roof was just completely destroyed. I mean, significant damage. But because we live in America, where we love to help our neighbors, when my father went out to inspect the property, the neighbor was already there doing repairs to this lady's home. And so in the conversation, it was, look, we know we're not going to be able to get certain things. There were certain, without going into details, there were certain parts that she had on her roof that were damaged. And, so the lady just assumed that it was going to take a while, and her neighbor knew it was going to take a while to get things in, or the cost was going to be, 2 to 3 times higher. And so I found that very interesting. And I think that may be something that we're coming up against with contractors, and maybe not necessarily the neighbors, but we may be starting. Armando said we're on the front end of this, and maybe we're going to see more of contractors either having to delay the repairs because of the cost to do things, or we're going to see just neighbors helping neighbors, a combination of that, coming out and just good old boy fixing the roofs. And at which point in time, as Michelle knows, that is going to affect coverage and going to affect claims and things of that nature. So just a little different perspective, I think, just from stuff that we've seen here recently. Neighbors helping neighbors and contractors taking longer to do the repairs. And so what does that set the homeowner up for? I guess time will tell.
Yeah, and actually that kind of leads me, because I was going to piggyback off of what you said, Calvin. I was going to ask if, and I'll start with you, ask if any contractor estimates have been assuming higher prices already, or have they adjusted at all? Have you seen anything in that area?
Yeah. So again, just through mentorship of the industry, we are seeing a lot of supplements. What actually, now that I think about it, supplements seem to be coming in faster, at least from my point of view. I don't know how everybody else on the panel feels, but at least on my point of view, supplements seem to be coming in faster, and standing on somebody's desk at the higher price or the higher cost of getting those goods and doing those repairs is definitely what I've seen boots on the ground.
Okay. And Michelle, have you seen any, price adjustments from contractors or estimates that are increasing?
We have actually seen we've gotten some notifications of increases based on the tariffs, and we're actually pushing back a little bit because they're jumping the gun a little bit. And so I think there is some opportunism playing out there where a contractor's hearing all the tariff words and stuff, and the price really hasn't increased yet, but they're trying to push it through. So we're just having to be more diligent about really checking and making sure, like, did that price really go up? I don't think so. So we're seeing a little of it, but most of it hasn't been really real yet.
Okay, all right. Yeah, they're jumping the gun already, huh? All right, Armando, I'll start this question with you. So, because you had mentioned setting expectations for the customers, right? I guess what's a good practice, or tell us what that looks like, as far as setting them up for what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, before we even get to the customer, I think it's important to highlight some of the things that we're doing right now is you have to be more efficient, right? So, streamlining our first notice of loss, how we're triaging claims, speeding up the inspection process to try to get ahead of those things. Because to the point that Michelle just made about the contractors, they are very opportunistic, and a lot of it's not even seeing it in their estimates, but it's the I'm going to say threat, for lack of a better term, of, well, you got to do this now because the prices are going to increase, right? So they're trying to use this tactic with customers, right? So again, going back to the customer now, it's really about educating the customer and presenting yourself in a well-educated professional manner, right? Restoring that confidence as you being the claims adjuster handling that particular claim. It's really just about making sure that the customer understands that you are aware of all of the different things that are happening within the economy right now, right? So being able to be agile, being more creative in our adjusting strategy, using technology, AI powered tools, excuse me. Again, going back to our managed repair programs, right? All of those things are allowing us to be more efficient with our claim handling, which inevitably should counteract some of that frictional costs, right?
Okay. And actually, Michelle, did I just no, I didn't ask you about this yet. Yeah, tell us, I guess, what expectations that I guess that your office or what y'all are setting for the insured and claimant.
Yeah, I think that, Armando alluded to this. There's a lot of noise out there right now. I mean, everybody's hearing tariffs and things are going to be more expensive and the slowed down. And so it's just more of a level setting and saying, here is actually what is happening. Here's what we're seeing. And trying to kind of filter out some of the noise and some of the, putting the insureds on high alert to make, because there's lots of and unscrupulous people out there who are telling them, well, you need to make sure you are getting X, Y, and Z because the tariffs are going to be higher. It's going to cost you more money to repair your home or whatever, and they're listening to that. And then we have to kind of bring them back in and say, look, here the prices haven't gone up. We're okay. Here's where it is. It's just we're having to spend a little more time and be more delicate now than probably ever because it's loud out there.
Yeah, I was going to say the famous friend that everyone in claims that has handled claims knows about. Well, my friend had this claim. And Calvin, so bringing it back to you, I guess what type of expectations, are you all setting for customers to, again, anticipate, what's going on?
Yeah, so obviously as a trainer, we don't really interact with the customer as much, but so we see our role as again educating the adjuster, but preparing the adjuster, and I think that's it. The mindset, explaining and as an adjuster, having the mindset of understanding what you're going into, and I use the term catastrophize. There's no need for you as the adjuster to show up and add to the catastrophe, right? So there's no need for you to go in and start panicking about tariffs or the economy or things. We have to kind of we're the honest broker in the game here, and so being empathetic versus sympathetic, right? Sympathy can get us in trouble, but being very empathetic and understanding that in the same in the same conversation here, the fear or the concerns that the insured has, they're real concerns. And so absorbing those as an adjuster while not over catastrophizing and adding to the situation is very important. And those are kind of the expectations that we're trying to set from our footprint.
Okay, thank you. And just a quick reminder for those that are in the session, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in actually, I think I said the chat, in the Q&A box. And we will definitely, try to get those to ask to the panelists. But my next question for you all, and I'll start with Armando. So I know we've seen, or have you seen any increased additional living expenses due to the extended repair times, delays? Can you tell us about that?
So again, it hasn't quite manifested into those type of delays, right? So I wouldn't say that we're seeing anything outside of the ordinary as it pertains to additional living expenses. The key is being able to address those concerns, right? Being able to reinforce and ensure confidence in our customers that if in fact that does happen, you have the coverage that's going to provide relief for that, right? So again, to the point that Michelle said, the noise is so distracting and can be, and it does take a little bit more fine tuning when we're talking about certain coverages that are available to the customer, right? Being able to draw upon examples such as post-catastrophe events, right? Post-tropical events, being able to use COVID as an example to just reinforce that if in fact these things do manifest and come to fruition, your policy does offer the coverage to support that, right? So it's really more or less about getting ahead of it and then actually seeing it in real time right now.
Okay. All right. And then Michelle, I guess same question that you kind of touched on a little bit before, but I guess to offer a little more detail to what Armando just said, anything that you've seen as far as increased additional living expenses, or as Armando said, is it kind of too early to tell?
Yeah, I think it hasn't come to fruition yet. Like I said, it's what we saw during COVID. We did have people maxing out of their additional living expenses, and I hope that we don't get there this time, but it could come, but not yet.
Okay. And then Calvin, anything you want to add before I move on to the next question?
I would just say this. I enjoy hearing Armando and Michelle from their standpoints and from their parts of the industry acknowledge that the industry as a whole seems to be doing exactly what my two esteemed colleagues here are mentioning, which is maybe slowing down to speed up. We're learning from lessons of the past from COVID. I think the industry's doing that and maybe starting to posture as an industry to prepare for things. A P equals E, right? Or P equals P, preparedness equals preparedness, right? If you're ready for it and you're prepared for it, then when and if it happens, then we can react in such an appropriate manner.
Okay, thank you. So we do have a question in the Q&A box. So it says, outside of property claims, have any of the panelists had experience with rising medical claim costs? And then it says, I'm on the work comp side of the house. It seems like multiple factors are in place, including medical inflation, medical treatment advancements, aging workforce, injuries to older employees, tend to be more costly, et cetera. Any thoughts on how to best manage the multiple factors in place on the medical cost of claims? And I'll kind of leave that open to, I guess, whoever the panelists want to answer that first.
I can jump in there and start. Yes, I mean, absolutely. Medical costs are probably increasing more than we've seen any other inflation in the industry. And I'm glad that you pointed out the older workforce. That's a fact that seems to get glossed or not even talked about very much, but we have older people who are not as healthy in the workforce now than we've ever had. And those are causing dramatic increases in the costs of those claims. And then, you throw on the litigation machine that seems to be exploding, and it seems to be a battle we're just trying to tread water against. And the last question you asked was, what's the best way to manage it? I just think we have to be more diligent on how we, you're going to have to squeeze out every efficiency that you can in these claims, because the fact is that the costs are just increasing, and that's going to get passed on to the consumer because somebody has to pay for it. Right. And, I just think it becomes, how efficiently can we handle these claims to kind of balance out the costs that we're seeing as they increase.
Okay. Armando, Calvin, do y'all want to chime in on rising medical claim costs?
Armando, I'm going to leave the medical claims up to you.
Well, I was gonna say it's hard to follow Michelle on that one, but I think Michelle hit the nail on the head, right? It's the supply and demand situation, right? You have an increase in medical treatment and not enough medicine, if you will. So we don't produce all of our medicine here. So same thing, right? So we're importing these medicines and medication and whatnot. And there's a cost associated with that, right? So to the point that Michelle said, which is a direct parallel to, auto and property claims, it's how can we be more efficient in our claim handling? It's really that if I'm trying to oversimplify this significant catastrophic potential, it's really how efficient can we be in our claim handling strategies, right? And I know I'm going to sound really cliche, but caring about the work that you do, right? It's not just let me come in here and cross this T, dot this I. It's going the extra mile, right? It's the little things that make the biggest difference. So taking pride in your role as a claims adjuster, whether regardless of segment of business, workers' comp, property, auto, what have you, taking pride in that and knowing that you do individually have an impact on the greater good.
Okay, yeah. Now I will thank you, Armando. I was going to say, Calvin, there's another question in the Q&A box, and I'll have you start. It says, what training do you recommend we take or get to be more prepared for the extensive details becoming required in the field?
Yeah, funny that question comes to me. Listen, that's a great question, and to the person that answered that question, kudos to you. So many folks enter this industry without the expectation of education. Well, if I just get my license, I'll be fine. I have a short answer, and the short answer to what training should we get is any and all education that you can get. I just passed the buck on to Armando about a medical question there, because I don't know much about the medical field. And so, I literally just wrote on my notepad here, learn more about medical claims, right? So to anybody out there looking to get training, good on you. Get any and all training that you can. I would just make this comment: validate your training. There's a lot of training opportunities that are out there, and they're not all cut from the same cloth, or they're not all of equal quality. So if you've got any questions about training, reach out to the hiring authorities and ask them hey, what do you think about, I'm thinking about taking this course on medical claims or workman's comp claims. Reach out to the firms or the hiring authorities and ask them what their take is on that training. But to the individual that asked that, good on you. Very, very seldom do I hear, hey, what training is available? Normally I hear, who's hiring? Well, it should be who's training instead of who's hiring. But I would just say take any and all, as long as it's validated and vetted training.
Thank you, Calvin. And Armando and Michelle, any piggybacks off of what Calvin said about any training that you recommend to just prepare those in the field for what's coming and what's required?
Yeah. I think, Calvin's our expert in that space. But beyond this topic today, be continuous learners, right? If I can impart anything on you, be a continuous learner, be a knowledge seeker. In our industry, knowledge is power, right? And the last thing I would say regarding training is go look for technology training, right? Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah.
Learn how to use these AI powered tools. Be more creative in how you adjust, whether it's virtual adjusting. There's so many different vendors out there that offer these tools that speed up your ability to do more, right? I think somebody on this panel said carriers and vendors like myself are looking for people to do more with less, right? The only way you do that, there's a finite number of hours in a day, right? We know what that is. And we're expecting you to do more with that time. And the only way you do that is if you pull those levers that allow you to be more creative in your ability to handle more claims. So look for those opportunities. Don't shy away from it. AI is here and it's alive and well, and it's not going anywhere. So I know insurance typically is a very slow to move and adapt to technology, but we've got to change that mindset and that framework for sure.
Okay. And Michelle, before I go on to the next question, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I don't think I need to take up any more space here. It's ditto, ditto, and ditto. I mean, they answered that beautifully.
Okay, thank you. So I do want to ask about total losses. And I'll start with you, Michelle. I guess what can we expect, or have you seen anything, I guess, as of yet, as far as more, I guess this is probably more so regarding vehicles being classified as total losses because of increased repair costs or parts and things like that. What have you seen in that area?
Yeah, I mean, as an industry, we know that the rate of total losses are increasing, and it is likely due to the fact that there are so many more parts and expensive parts on vehicles now that it is, it has become more cost efficient to total them than to try to repair them. I think I saw recently a graphic that showed a Honda Accord back in 1990, and it got hit and there were 13 parts that needed to be replaced. And then if it was hit in the same spot on a Honda Accord today, there were something like 60 parts, and many of those were really expensive computer sensors and everything. And so the exponential amount of parts that are now included in a vehicle that costs so much more, it's leading to a much higher rate of total losses than we've ever seen.
Yeah, I can believe that. Calvin, anything you want to add to that?
I think you just got the expert answer there. I would just say being cognizant of these things, right? Two quick points here. I don't know if anybody's been in a new car these days, but the technology in these new cars is just insane, right? And so as technology grows and supply chains potentially have more of a constraint. I think I think our carrier friends are gonna have to take that into account. Is cars are getting smarter and the parts are becoming harder to find, or like Michelle said, more cost effective to maybe just total it out or something like that, rather than paying for all of this technology or waiting on the supply chains.
One extra add on there is it's not just the parts, it's we don't have the skills to repair
Right.
a lot of these
Right.
vehicles and a lot of the technologies that's in these vehicles.
Okay, yeah. Armando, do you want to add to that?
When we think about, the topic that we're talking about today, this is one of the areas that we really are like honing in on, right? When you think about EV vehicles and the batteries, a lot of these parts are being manufactured and made in Mexico, China. The cost associated with those parts are going to total out vehicles in and of itself anyway, right? So it's something that we are really keeping a close eye on and being mindful of how those things can impact the auto industry.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I have one last question before we move on to final thoughts. So the question in the Q&A box, it says, what advice can you give to adjusters/claims professionals to help manage and cope with stress/trauma that they may experience dealing with customers/claimants who are experiencing high stressful events in their lives? It says, i.e., managing the impacts of vicarious trauma as claims professional. So I guess Armando, you're fresh on my screen here. I'll have you start with that.
Yeah. I'll tell people, uh, being in the claims industry is a very uh, thankless job sometimes, right? But if you really think about your role and you think about the impact that you have, in most cases, regardless of segment, you're helping a customer during some traumatic time for them, right? So the first thing I would say is don't internalize their trauma. Recognize that you are here to offer some support. And there are times where we're not going to be able to do something because there's no coverage or whatever the case may be. But understanding your role and how you have an opportunity to really impact somebody's life, even though they are experiencing a level of trauma, the key thing is not to internalize it and individualize it to you. Don't personalize it. And really think about how you're helping, even in those times where we may not be able to afford coverage, right? Just being able to offer advice or what have you. And again, being mindful of that advice, but recognizing that your role is only to be a steward of helping this person become whole again will help shift what could be stressful to something that gives you like some value, right? Make you feel good about what you're doing versus internalizing that stress, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess Calvin and Michelle, any quick, I guess, kind of comments on that question before we go to final thoughts?
I love this question because it actually says a lot about where we are now. Back in my day, if you had mentioned that you were stressed out from your job, somebody would have just told you to get tough skin and rub some dirt on it. The fact that we are acknowledging it now and the fact that we are giving voice to it is tremendous. And I applaud the fact that, we are out there realizing that this is a stressful position or profession, and we need to really train our leaders to recognize it and understand it. We need to give our associates, tools to help them manage and work through it. I know at our carrier, we offer, mental health free of charge, and that is really important. And I think that we need, as an industry, to realize that we're dealing with really stressful situations in everything we do, and that can't not have an effect on the people that work for us. So we need to give it voice and give it a way to kind of, them to work it out. I think that's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you. And Calvin, real quick, because I know we're coming on time, any final thoughts you want to add to that?
I really hate that we're coming up short on time, because this is a topic that I am extremely passionate about. But because we're short on time, I will say this: it's real. The stress is real, and to Armando's point of finding something that brings joy to you to relieve that stress. I tell new adjusters and aspiring adjusters all the time, approach it as if you finally get to be the good guy in the story. If that's the one thing that you can find, as the adjuster, to kind of essentially put a wall up. It's hard to put a wall up, but if you can be the good guy in the story, if you can help someone have a more pleasant experience with the claims process, then walk away knowing that. But to the question, specific to the question of how to deal with it, I learned this in the Army. 22 years in the Army, I learned this. One of the most valuable things I learned is to just breathe. Don't forget to breathe. Too often as adjusters, we get all tight, we get all tense, and we forget to breathe. Breathe. Give yourself some time to relax. Shut that computer down at the end of the day. Let your brain regroup. Go for a run. Go for a walk. Play chess. Whatever it is that you do, but create some personal time to breathe, because this industry is stressful and the stress is real. And the mental health aspect from an adjuster standpoint is you've got to be mentally strong and take that time for yourself.
Okay. All right. And again, like I said, I know we're coming up on time, but can you all tell me, I guess, what do you want our audience to leave with today about what we've talked about? And I'll start with you, Calvin.
Yeah, kind of segue from the previous question. First of all, I'd like your audience to know that organizations such as this are key. Professional people will join professional organizations. And so I'd like folks on here, obviously, if you're not a member of this association, you should be. I'd like folks to know that the more people that you can network with and the more people you can snap link yourself in, the better you're going to the more you're going to succeed, and the more folks around you, like for the last question there on the mental health, having a network that you can fall back on and you can vent or you can discuss whatever you're seeing, from your own little foxhole is super important. And my parting word on this is that our fellow Americans and Canadians and Mexicans, they deserve professional adjusters. So I would challenge the audience with that. Be a professional in every aspect of the word. I would just leave it there. Our fellow Americans deserve, especially in these times, they deserve professional adjusters. So I would just challenge everybody here to be the most professional adjuster that you can be.
Thank you, Calvin. Armando, what do you want to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, first, thank you for the opportunity to be here with you all and share a little bit about my little glimpse of insight on this topic. But again, I think, we've talked about it at multiple times throughout the call. Be continuous learners. Be very curious about what's going on in the economy, in the world, and how it impacts your roles, your customers. Be fact finders as well, right? I think somebody on this call said something along the lines of, validate. Make sure that you are validating the information, because there's a lot of fake news out there as well, right? So be mindful and cognizant of that. And at the end of the day, we're claims professionals. Live in that space, own that. And I think at the end of the day, regardless of what's going on in the economy, if you maintain that professional etiquette, you'll be in the right spot.
Thank you, Armando. And Michelle, what do you want to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, y'all all took the time to attend this webinar, so you're already doing some of the things you need to do, like stay informed, keep up to date. Let's not panic. This is something that's out there, and believe me, all the C-suites are talking about it, but let's take a step back, take a breath and say, is this real or is this noise? And figure out, let's be prepared, but not overreact. So thank you.
Thank you for watching this flashback episode of NAAIA. We appreciate your time and hope you found the insights valuable. Stay tuned for more enriching content. Until next time, thank you for being a part of the NAAIA community.